This is an overview video for ECE 120 Contemporary Issues in Early Childhood Education, Historical Timeline Assessment Tier 1. Make sure that you have read the instructions that are posted on our D2L page. You can see at the top the breadcrumbs, table of contents, assessments, summative written, and then you'll find in there the Historical Timeline Assessment Tier 1. Please carefully read the instructions. Move down and identify who your partner is for this project. This is a team project and you will be working with a classmate. If you have not done so already, identify that person's name and then use the class list email tool to communicate with your team members. There is a team project task tracker tool document that is provided. You can see it down here, and that is to support the team project in that if you choose to create a timeline and division of workload, that would be a tool that is available for you. It is not required. In addition, there's an article here, tips on participating in group work and projects, online infographic. If it's been a while since you've worked on a team project, that may be a helpful reference as well. Down below, you will find 4 documents. We've talked about the team project task tracker tool. That again is optional and is not to be turned in. You will have the historical timeline rubric, the historical timeline example, and your historical timeline assessment supplement. Let's look at the assessment supplement first. This is the Historical Timeline Assessment Supplement document. It is one of 4 that are listed on D2L. Make sure that you have read and suggested to reread this document and also to have reviewed this together with your partner. The assessment requirements include the following. As we've discussed, connect with your team member, divide the work, plan for a completion date to review your project prior to the due date. Make sure that you have read chapters 4 and 5 in your textbook and understand why the past matters. These also include major events and historical people that have impacted the early childhood education field. Those major events and historical people will be part of your historical timeline presentation. Review the rubric as well, which we will do after we complete this secondary document. For this assignment, your team will use a website creator. Take time to discuss with your team member which tool you will be using. It needs to be a collaborative option. Your website creator can be one of the following: Weebly, Wix, Google Sites, which is available through your free Google Drive account provided by Dell Tech, or another interactive timeline builder. Again, the asterisk reminder is that you are not paying to create or publish this project. There are many free tools that are available, and you also need to make sure that you include your instructor when you go to publish it so that he or she has access. This is a tiered assessment and will require the team to submit 2 components. The first is Tier 1. The historical timeline tool is available, and that's what you have chosen above. Which of the tools are you using? Your team will develop and submit the following information in that presentation format: full names of each team member, a title page, the link to your presentation tool, again ensuring that you provide access to your course instructor. If your instructor opens this in the D2L submission site and it cannot be opened, it cannot be graded. The presentation tool needs to include a title page, identifying at least 8 to 12 required documents. Those are the events and people that you're referencing in chapters 4 and 5. And for Tier 1, you are going to complete 2 events. So the full required information, which includes the following. You're considering why the event and or the persons involved is important enough to make one of your top 12 timeline lists. And then also, how did the event impact, and is it still relevant today? Why is it still relevant today? The second part is, how is the person or event impact early childhood education? These are 2 or 3 sentences, and we're going to look at the example as well. You also need to include 2 resources, one of which can be your textbook because you are reading chapters 4 and 5. Continuing on, teams must post the link to the presentation tool, making sure, again, that your instructor has access. And there will be 1 submission for each team. 1. The first tier is worth 5 points. So let's go back and do a quick review. Your names need to be included, full names, first and last of your team members. Make sure that your link to your presentation tool is accessible to your instructor. The presentation itself that you're submitting for Tier 1 includes the following: a timeline that includes 8 of your 12 events. 2 of those 8 events must be complete. In that completed box, you're including information in a sentence format. Why the event or person involved is important enough to make the top 12 list, of which you're submitting 8 for the first tier. And then how that person or event impacts early childhood education today. Why is it still relevant? So think of a theorists, an event that's happened in early childhood education over time, historical timeline, and you're going to include 2 to 3 sentences per person or event. You're going to do considerable amount of research, and then you're going to edit it down. You must include at least 2 resources. One of them is going to be your textbook because that's going to be your initial reference. Moving on to historical timeline presentation, which is your Tier 2. You're going to continue to develop. Now you're going to look at all 12 events. So for Tier 1, you're identifying 8 events, and you're going to actually write and develop 2 of those 8. Tier 2 will now be the completion. At this point, you will have received feedback from your instructor for those 8 timeline items and the 2 full events. Tier 2, you'll move on. You'll revise the 2 you submitted if necessary, and you'll develop the remaining 10. Same thing. Why is the event or the person important enough to make your top 12 list? Making sure that your timeline is in sequential historical order. And how did the event or person impact? Why is it still relevant today? How do you see it in the classrooms? What part of that theory, what part of the program that somebody may have developed, why is it relevant today? How do you see it in early childhood education? Think of your personal and professional experiences. Once you've selected your 12 key events, then you'll bring them to life in the timeline. Key dates, sequential order, important people, how the person or event impacted early childhood, 2 to 3 sentences, and then video, image, or some kind of multimedia for each of the events and persons that you're bringing the timeline to life. These need to be your original words. You are not to copy and paste. The second tier is worth 15% of this grade. At this point, Tier 2, you now need to expand and you need to have 3 to 5 resources. All must be APA cited. Remember, there's an APA reference guide on the Deltec library website. Your textbook may be one of your resources. Okay. Finally, review and complete your completed presentation for spelling, grammar, active hyperlinks, resources, etc. to support the assessment requirements. Please take time to read the assessment rubric to ensure that you're meeting those criterion. Okay. The final note here is about why there is a team project in this course, and you can read this independently. We're going to conclude this video with a review of the examples. Historical Timeline Examples document is also available. These are provided as a reference and should not be copied. Please be aware that there are 3 examples, and they are illustrating different aspects of this presentation. Example 1 is an example of a properly formatted timeline event. This part of the presentation earned an A. The theorist is Martin Luther. You can see this very short 2-3 sentences and the image. You can choose an image, you can choose a video. Think about how you're going to create this. The timeline that they chose for this presentation was vertical. Right? There's a snippet of the next one. So make sure they're in chronological order. The next example is well-constructed slide. It's including the required information, but the text is cut off at the bottom. So when you're reviewing your PowerPoints or your presentation slides, make sure that we can read your information, your presentation. Okay? Make sure that the font is large enough. Make sure to think about the font that you've chosen, the color of the font, the background. Right? Is it clear for your audience to review? See, noting at the bottom that this is cut off. Right? So that would be a deterrent on the rubric. Example 3, this presentation overall earned a C, and you can click into this link. It's an active link to review. The final document posted is the Historical Timeline rubric. There's a rubric for Tier 1 as well as for Tier 2. The criterion here is how you've organized your content, the accuracy, the written description, and the credits. That is the Tier 1 rubric. Make sure that you've read this. You're shooting for exemplary. So go over it, use this rubric and the Tier 2 rubric to follow along with your presentation slides. Are you meeting the requirements of the rubric, which tie back to the assessment supplement? We hope that this is helpful information. Work with your partner to determine the timeline for which you will work on this project, and also navigating through these various documents, and also working with your instructor if you have any specific questions.